Thanks, Bob. So thank you all for joining us for round two. And I should say, you know, we have an audience, which is unusual here tonight for us, in that we have an audience, any one of which could easily be on the panel as well. So in the spirit of California, where I now live, where we have the kind of the indoor-outdoor living, we're going to kind of do an indoor-outdoor panel here, where we're going to talk for about 15 minutes, but then I'm hoping to bring all of you in for a broader kind of room-wide conversation to talk about, kind of weigh in on the same issues that we're going to be discussing with the panel and that I was discussing with the mayor. So let's just start off with where I did start off with the mayor, because, you know, Charlotte has a very positive economic story in many different ways. It ranks among the top 20 metros in population growth and employment growth since 2000. But the poverty rate is above the national average. The poverty rate for African American and Hispanic kids under 18 is about 6 times the level for whites under 18. And studies have placed it at the very low end on upward mobility, the chance for kids born in the bottom fifth to get to the top fifth. So today, if you were going to kind of, you know, grade the city today on the extent to which the undeniable growth it is experiencing is really rippling through the whole community, how would you grade it today? Henry, maybe start us off?
Well, I'd have to give it a D+. I won't give it an F, because I think that we're making some serious efforts to ameliorate this, but I think that there's so much more that needs to be done, and
Yeah.
So if we're talking about just the population of persons that we are focusing on the task force, I too would give it a D-, maybe even an F, because when you really look at generationally what has happened, that's our real focus. Charlotte has focused a lot on bringing folks in that have these middle and upper jobs, but when you really look at the folks who we're talking about, it's generation after it's generational that has really suffered.
Bob, what do you say?
Well, I would say 2 numbers. 1, 4th fastest growing city in America, so something good is happening. There is economic opportunity here, and people are voting with their feet, if you will. A second number, and it's the premise behind which a lot of the work that Ophelia is a part of and what you're talking to, 50th out of 50 cities in terms of upward mobility. That's the really bad news. When I meet with colleagues of mine from around the country, even though we are 50th out of 50, cities that are even ahead of us on that list, this is not unique to Charlotte.
Absolutely.
It's something that's happening in a lot of cities. And so I think the question is, can we be better than 50th out of 50 in answering the question and finding solutions to change the dynamic?
You know, one thing that's really striking, and again, it is not at all unique to Charlotte, and common to many of the fast-growth cities. We've done some analysis at the Atlantic looking at the educational credentials of people in the workforce in our major cities, the cities that have created the most jobs since 2000. And we compared the educational attainment of people who now live, say, in Charlotte or Denver or Austin, who were born in state, versus the educational credentials of those who were born out of state. And if you look at Charlotte, 47% of the working age people in Charlotte who were born out of state have a 4-year degree or more. 46%, excuse me. Of the people born in Charlotte, in the state, in North Carolina, working age people, only 27% have a degree. So you are clearly a magnet for talent from all over the country. And you are, that is a big number, 47% of all the people who came here from out of state have at least a 4-year college degree, but only, you know, about 20 points lower. My question is that what does that model mean for a community? Is it sustainable economically? Is it sustainable socially to be importing so much of your high-skilled talent?
Well, I think one of you, and to your point earlier, America, I think, gets a low mark. So other cities are like us because I think America gets a low mark. But I will say in reference to your question, and I've just lost
bringing in whether it is sustainable to have a model that relies on attracting a large amount of talent from outside the state, but not necessarily having a large number of the kids who grow up here graduating and being in a position to compete for the jobs.
I think what unfortunately happens when that occurs is you continue what we see as a major issue in Charlotte, in that segregation. So you bring in folks who have high skills, you bring in jobs that are high paying jobs. And many times those persons are going to be and live in communities and be around persons that look like themselves and have the education that they have. So what is happening to those 26% that you made mention of is that the divide is getting larger. And so this chasm is happening in that regard.
Bob, I mean, it's never a bad thing to be attracting talented people from everywhere.
So is it sustainable? As long as those educated people are coming here from elsewhere, it is sustainable, and it has a perverse effect. It takes the pressure off of our local institutions to produce that talent. 30 years ago, if a bank needs to hire a teller, they get 4 applications. 3 of them were product of local institutions. 1 might have been from out of state. The pressure was on if the quality, if the talent level wasn't there. Today, of those 4 applications, 2 are coming from upstate New York, 1 from Florida, maybe 1 is coming locally. And so as that talent is finding its way to the jobs, it lessens the pressure of the business community, if you will, to put pressure on CMS or other educational institutions.
Yeah, having that, go ahead.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, though, not all of the folks that gravitate here are coming here for, jobs at the big 3 or the big 4. They're coming here because they see opportunities for innovation, even though it may not necessarily look like that. They come here as artists, right? They come here as musicians and so forth, because there is a compelling reason for them to come to a place that appears to be dynamic. And so I think that if we're able to not just attract talent that is coming here for rather high-paying jobs, but also create an ecosystem where folks can come to apply their creative skills and to come as innovators and to come as entrepreneurs, I think we can begin to maybe shift some of the dynamics.
Well, let's talk about this, because your project, focuses on channeling young African American men primarily into entrepreneurial activities and entrepreneurial opportunities. To what extent is there that bridge between the growing entrepreneurial sector here and the communities where you work, and what does it take to kind of widen that channel of connection?
Well, interestingly enough, most of the guys that come through my program are imports as well.
Are imports as well?
Yes,
wow.
Right, exactly. We find that there are very few Charlotteans that are in the program, and one of the things I'm hoping that we can do is to begin to attract even more talent here. Attract the best and the brightest.
Can I interrupt? Why is that? Why do you find more success of people coming through from outside than local?
Well, I mean, most of the fellows in the program actually have jobs, and so they're looking at entrepreneurship as another opportunity for them. They're not necessarily here to become entrepreneurs, and that is a driving instinct on their part. But they're looking at, hey, listen, there may be an opportunity for me to ply my trade elsewhere once I've moved here, once I've established some roots. And so I think that this is part of the same sort of dynamic that brings other folks here to Charlotte as well. They're part of that wave that's been coming here.
So, Dr. Garmon-Brown, I mentioned to the mayor that one of the things that makes Charlotte fascinating, the challenge that you face of connecting all of your communities to the growth you're experiencing is not at all unique. As I said, the governor of Colorado describes it as the Colorado paradox, people coming from all over, but the kids who grow up on certain neighborhoods of Denver, might as well be on the moon when it comes to competing for some of the jobs the city is creating. But one of the things that's striking about Charlotte are the kind of structural efforts to kind of look at it and explore it. And the task force commission that you are co-chairing is obviously an example. Tell us a little bit about the process you've gone through, where you are, and when you expect to be releasing some recommendations.
You asked a question earlier about to the mayor in terms of public and private coming together, and I can say that the task force is an example of that. We have had persons, the city has come to with the county. We've had funders such as Z. Smith Reynolds and John M. Belk and the Knight Foundation and the Foundations for the Carolinas coming together to pool their resources for this. Our task force meets every 3 weeks, on a Thursday every 3 weeks, and we've done that for a year. We meet for 3 hours every 3 weeks, and it has been an overwhelming amount of information that we've learned. We've had experts coming from around the country. Many of you have, Robert Putnam with Our Kids, Richard Reeves with the logos. And we had a gentleman, Joe Jones, who came from Baltimore, who talked about fatherhood, because a lot of times we talk about a lot of things, but we don't talk about fatherhood in the way that we need to talk about fatherhood. Our task force consists of a diversity of people in terms of clergy, as well as all the different sectors of the community, Jewish community as well, represented there, the business community. But when you look at us, just our faces, you will see diversity in that regard. But when you hear our stories, there are stories of persons who, they may have some element of wealth now, but they were born in West Virginia in poverty and abuse that was amazing. And so I would say that more than 50% of the persons on the task force were raised in poverty, and so were able to move from that quintile near the bottom or at the bottom to a higher level.
And when you look at the levers you have to make a difference, and maybe both of you can weigh in on this as well, when you look at the levers you have to make a difference on the fundamental challenge you're talking about here, about expanding opportunity, creating more upward mobility, how do the levers that are available locally compare to what you would need either from the state or the federal government to make a difference? Are you far enough along where you can say, yes, we can make a big dent on this problem through things we do at our own, we have in our own control? Or do you think it is primarily decisions made by entities bigger than the city of Charlotte?
I think the amazing thing about this is that we have the control one person at a time. And I think that when you look at the different indicators, social capital is one. When you look at how segregated we are, sometimes social capital in terms of one person being able to help another, and we looking at it as our children, our community, from that our perspective. But I really believe that we can do what we need to do if each person were to say, I'm going to do what I can do. And that may sound very trite, but it really does make a difference in terms of the mentoring. And we are really looking at this social capital. I was talking to a venture capitalist today. I had a friend that her son just graduated from Stanford's School of Business on Sunday. And this is an African-American kid that was born to a single parent home. And I used my social capital to connect this venture capitalist to my friend who just graduated from MBA school and is trying to find his way. If we could, Richard Reeves says that we should no longer have take your child to school day. It should be take someone else's child to school day. And so that type of thing really, I think, can make a significant difference.
Bob, what do you think in terms of the ability of Charlotte through public-private actions to make a significant dent on this mobility problem versus needing decisions at bigger entities than themselves?
Well, I think we are trying to find the next answer to that. I think 30 or 40 years ago, one of the CEOs of one of the largest employers in town would have led this effort, would have gotten a handful of other CEOs together. They would have decided, here's what we're going to do. The community would have fallen in line. The public sector would have fallen in line. We would have gone to the state. We would have gone to the federal government. They would have fallen in line as partners with us. It's the Metropolitan Revolution era. We can't count on the federal government to be there. They're basically broke. State government, we have an incredible polarization that you and the mayor were talking about. It's as if Charlotte and our state government perspectives are on different planets on a whole variety of issues, and things that we were able to do historically in partnership with the state simply just aren't possible now. So I think the idea that we're going to have to come up with these solutions at the local and regional level, the idea that we're going to have to do it collectively as a group of diverse citizen leaders versus that old CEO model is what we're evolving into. I think we're Charlotte, we can do it. But we are learning how to do it as we speak, and we're taking some growing pains as we go along.
And so it is at once a more localized but more inclusive localized model. It's both. I mean, you're saying that essentially you're more on your own, but there are more people around the table that have to have their voices heard.
Well, the population is growing. The population is increasingly diverse. Throw a few numbers at you. In the first decade of the new century, we grew by 32%. The white population grew by 14%, the African American by 50%, the Asian population by 90%, the Latin American population by 150%. There are more voices that want and deserve a seat at the table. Governing is harder when you have more people who are at the table. It's just not as simple. It takes more time, it takes more patience, and that's the reality of where we are, and we're going to be in that stage for a long, long time.
That's one of the things I was going to ask about. I mean, Charlotte, like many other cities, particularly in the southeast, but not only, historically it was kind of a binary white-black place where that was the division, that was the tension, that was the partnerships or the confrontations. Now you've got other dimensions, as you mentioned. The Asian American population is growing substantially, and the Hispanic population has grown enormously. How does that complicate leadership in a city like this, to have more different faces at the table?
I don't think it should complicate leadership at all. I think that if leadership, as was demonstrated by our mayor here, is thinking about how to be more inclusive and how to embrace that sort of dynamic that you're speaking of, then it shouldn't complicate things. Maybe there's challenges about that, about being able to work with that sort of demographic change. But I don't think that it ought to complicate the picture at all.
How about?
When I think about inclusion, I heard you ask the mayor about inclusion and equity.
And equity.
I think inclusion, my answer would have been inclusion is easier, because once you can get to the table, but you may not be able to really be able to benefit. I think that what happened in our past with the major leadership that we had, those leaders that came together and did all of what they did was phenomenal. But we do have this problem. And this problem didn't come overnight. This problem is a problem that actually it has developed over decades.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I will always remember is Ron Carter. Dr. Ron Carter is the president of Johnson C. Smith University. And some years ago, when the chamber decided not to leave town, but to stay here and really go around and learn at Charlotte, Dr. Carter said, as a newcomer, he'd only been in Charlotte maybe a year or so at that point in time, and he says, as a newcomer, let me help you to see Charlotte through my eyes. And he said, when you cross 77, when you cross the bridge for 77, there's this Charlotte and there's that Charlotte. He said, it's like when you cross that bridge, then you've forgotten about this Charlotte, and you've only focused on this Charlotte. That was profound for me, and it continues to be impactful for me today. Although I think that persons were thoughtful, because I do believe that our forefathers, I'll call them, and for the city, because it was mainly fathers, old guys, had the interest of the city. And we would not be the Charlotte we are today without that. So don't hear me say anything else but that. But by the same token, that actually continued to allow old guys and old guys' families to really be able to accumulate the wealth and be able to have what Charlotte has now. I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we're talking about generational poverty. And when you're talking about generational poverty, you're talking about a grandchild who has really no hope. They haven't seen hope. They haven't seen the vision. They haven't seen anything outside of themselves. Where they live is poor. Where they go to school is poor. The people they're around are poor. And that's not to say that being poor is bad. I was raised in the inner city ghetto of Detroit myself. But it is to say that when you don't have the exposure and when you don't have the social capital, that your potential to be able to get out of that and your potential to not get pregnant. Sometimes when Dee and I were talking earlier, that one of the remedies for unintended pregnancy is hope and a sense of a future. When you don't have that, then unintended pregnancy will continue. So maybe we need to do that.
Go ahead.
But if I may just say
Yeah.
something about this, and you know, it's one thing to look at this from the point of view of the individual, but I also think that we have to look at this from the point of view of what systems were put in place that allowed for this to occur. So, I mean, one of the things that happened here in Charlotte is, and it's happened all over the country, and we can see the ill effects of that, and that's urban renewal. All right, so when we talk about 77, Route 77 or 277, and how it destroyed a community here that was thriving, all right, and then the unintended or maybe the intended consequences of that are what we're facing today. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, listen, a young person needs to have hope, but look at that within the context of, well, what were the conditions that were set up to get them to a place where they are feeling hopelessness?
Well, as I mentioned, we have an incredible wealth of talent in the audience, and I'd like to invite people to kind of weigh in, not so much necessarily even to ask questions, but on these core issues that we're talking about. How do you create an economy that has more broadly shared growth? What is the role of inclusion in economic growth? What are relations? What is the answer moving forward between the city and the state? What's the role of the public and the private sector in addressing these various problems? So anybody here? We have our co-chair. Do you want to maybe offer a few thoughts?
I'm happy to.
Yeah, we got a mic coming your way. Yeah.
So I guess I'll just share an opinion, and as we think about this, and as Ophelia and I have led this effort, I have come to realize that there's a moral imperative because addressing this issue is the right thing to do. There's an economic imperative, and I think, you know, Bob, from your work, for us to be competitive on the global scale, the global competitive city we want to be, we've got to have more of our citizenry engaged in a productive way. So there's very much an economic incentive. And then I think there's a safety imperative for us, because I think these are issues that, if left unaddressed, create a tinderbox that simply waits for a spark that can ignite something that none of us want to see. So I think of it in terms of a moral imperative, an economic imperative, and a safety imperative.
Anybody else? Yeah, over in the back there.
I've been in Charlotte for more than
Just identify
35
yourself,
years, and in the faith community and in the nonprofit world. And I have to tell you that I can't imagine there's a city anywhere that is more charitable than Charlotte. My question to you all and my thoughts is, how do we shift our focus from being charitable toward those in need toward being justice-oriented and creating more opportunities for equality and changing the systems so that we are not content just to be charitable? Could you speak to that?
I think your point is well taken in terms of us being charitable. And excuse me in some regards for this example, but it's the fish, or it's the fish or fisherman. How do you teach a person? Well, one of the concerns I have that it's been easy to be charitable is I can give you something, but I don't have to have a relationship with you to give you something. But when you really teach me how to fish, then you got to teach me how to put the worm on the hook. You got to teach me how to throw. You got to teach me, and in teaching me, you have to be with me. And you have to be with me not just for one time. You got to be with me for an extended period of time. So I think that one of the things that can happen is that when you're charitable, and it makes you feel good, and I don't want people not to be charitable, but when you're charitable, it can make you feel good. But that's only, it's like the chocolate I eat. It's only temporary, right? And it really doesn't get us to where we need to be. But to develop a relationship with me, to value me to the point where you actually sit with me and want me to be better, along with whatever is charitable. One of our co-chairs, it's just the two of us, one of our members on the task force, David Chadwick with Forest Hills, says that $5,000 and a mentor gets a kid out of college, gets a kid into and through college. And in essence, what he's saying there is that there is need for charitability, right? For people to be charitable. But there is that mentoring that has to go along with the charitable. So thank you for charity.
Can I follow up? Ask Bob a question. You noted before, I think correctly, that the ability to draw on talent from all over the country and in many cases around the world, is something of a pressure valve release on the need to kind of improve the outcomes for the kids who are growing up here, because you're not just, the employers are not dependent only on them. Given that, if you had a bet today, is the city going to have the political will and consensus to make policy changes in the schools that significantly change the pattern we're seeing in concentrations of economic and racial segregation? Or do you think in the end, there's just not going to be, that's just going to be too difficult and you're going to get relatively minor change?
Is that one of the questions I can defer to a member of the school board?
Yeah.
If you had a bet, what's the trajectory that we're on here?
I wouldn't place that bet. I
Okay.
think it's a very important question. I'm not sure that we know the answer. I think we're facing the question with our pupil assignment process right now. We're taking our 60th inner-city visit to Miami next week, and we've been told that Miami offers some examples of positive examples for how to do pupil assignment in the right way. I think, look, I entered the second grade in 1971. My class that graduated in 82 is the first that graduated under 12 years of court-ordered busing. We've been in a post-busing era now. I think we're still trying to figure out what that means. And one of the things we know that it means is we've resegregated our schools along racial lines. We've resegregated them along socioeconomic lines. Are we going to make any substantial structural changes to that through this process? I'm hopeful and optimistic, but we'll see.
Anybody want to address that from the audience?
Mayor,
Yes, go ahead.
Our school board chair.
I'm sorry, could you just identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know who you are. Could you just identify who you are?
Okay, one of the things that we see as a problem
Identify
is...
yourself, Mary. That's what he said.
Oh,
Identify
I'm
yourself.
sorry. Mary McCrae, Chair of the School Board.
Thank you.
Board of Education. And I've been standing a lot today, so I'd like to
Yes,
sit if
please.
that's okay. Graduation. One of the things that we see as a primary problem with us is equity. And so one of our cornerstones right now is equitable access. And this is for our children in poverty, making sure, because they have been the ones that have been sort of locked out because of the systems that have been placed on them, that they did not have access to a lot of programs. So we are giving children, we're hoping that this is going to be the first thing we roll out, is that equitable access for all children who want to come into specialized programs and have those choices, and making sure parents of those children are aware of what we are offering so that they can see that as a cornerstone for them moving up and being mobile.
What does it take to achieve that equitable access? What are the keys? Is it transportation? Is it outreach to parents? What do you have to do?
It is going to be
translate that?
transportation, because one of the things that we had done was when times were bad, we went to shuttle stops. And if I'm a parent and I have to be at work at 7 in the morning and my child's shuttle stop is at 8:15, I can't get them there. I don't have anybody to get them there. So equitable access to transportation means if you want to get into a magnet program or a choice program, we're going to find a way to get your child into that school building. And it's going to come through a neighborhood stop, a consolidated stop, whatever kind of stop. But we're also going to allow those parents who want to keep a shuttle stop to remain with the shuttle stop. So I think we're just rolling out different ways, because we understand one size doesn't fit all, and shuttle stops doesn't fit everybody.
Was there someone in the back? I think you wanted to, were you raising your hand there, sir? Yes, I think you were. Caught you.
It was more so, hi, I'm Tarek Tidwell. It was more so just to add on to that, and actually I had a talk with Joseph Garcia. I actually moved from Denver. I've been here for about 6 months. But I think one of the things is around the linchpin. If you would have looked at Denver 25 years after that decision about how resegregation actually impacted the achievement gap that actually led to that Colorado paradox, I think you'll see exactly how this has crippled that economy for some time, but there had to be some unartificial or artificial ways of attracting talent. into that. You get my point around artificial ways of attracting talent, of course, to the city, to the economy. But I think one of the things is that we have to find a way to ensure that there's some level of equity. There's some level of social integration. I grew up in Middlesex County, and in that same report, when I looked at it, our county was in the top 5, Middlesex County in New Jersey. And social integration was really probably one of the major factors that actually led to it. And it's one of the things that led to a viable economy. You look at the city or county itself, how many good companies are there, how much talent is there, how big the universities are growing, it's probably led to all these spillover effects. Now something that we have to think about is, what is the spillover effects that can actually make more value to our economy?
So let me ask our panel, because I know we're way into overtime, but it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate all of you participating. Let me ask each of you to give me your thoughts on kind of the core elements that, this is a community that has many things going for it, but to create an environment in which there is more sustainable and more equitable growth, more inclusive growth, what are the core things that have to change, you think?
Well, one of the things is, and a friend of mine mentioned this to me yesterday, he said it's one thing to be on the table, and it's another thing to be at the table, all right? And I think that really what we need to have, or what we need to do, is to hear from the folks in the neighborhoods where they live, the unusual suspects, the folks that we ordinarily don't hear from. Because more often than not, a lot of the conversation that takes place at a higher level, maybe the 30,000-foot view, right? But I think that if we hear from the people themselves, who are very, very clear about what their issues are, right? I think that can give us an understanding of how to then develop policy that will provide the equity that we're looking for, that will sort of diffuse the social economic resources that we have in a much better way.
Dr. Garmon-Brown.
That's, well,
not to preview your whole report here, you
right.
give away the lead
and
here.
I'm not even going to go with my report. I'm going to say that we have to be a city, a county, a place, a nation that's not driven by fear. I think fear is the driver that causes us to do a lot of things, and that causes us to separate ourselves in ways that we can't get to where we need to get to. So if we were not so driven by fear, and by bringing fear down, we have more relationships.
We have a great asset, and that Dale said we're charitable. We're a citizenry that wants to do the right thing. When we put, our last school bonds got 70% countywide. Our last city bonds got 65% of the public support. The state had a bond issue on the ballot in March for universities, community colleges, state parks. It got 60+% of the vote. I think people want to do the right thing. They want to invest in the future, the right things for all of the right reasons. I think the challenge is the evolving leadership model. It is going to look different as we grow larger, as we grow more diverse. How do we capture and harness all that while still providing strong leadership from a citizenry that wants to do the right things?
Well, thank you. So it's been a great conversation. As I said, our project, our Renewal series is really about looking at how communities are organizing to confront the challenges. And there have been very few places that we have been where I think people are more directly facing and more kind of overtly confronting the very real challenges facing so many communities, even the ones that have the best overall economic story to tell. And I would just, as a final thought, before giving it back to Bob for some final words, the ability to kind of solve these problems by importing talent, ultimately you run out of people to import. I mean, a majority of our public school students in the U.S. now, if you went to every desk in every community and added up all the kids, a majority of our public school students are now kids of color. By the early 2020s, a majority of our high school graduates nationwide will be kids of color. In 46 of the 50 states, not only is the share of white kids under 18 lower than it was in 2000, the number is lower. And what that means is that all of the future growth in the workforce are from the groups that are today on the wrong sides of all of these income and educational attainment disparities. And that increasingly over time is an issue not only for those communities, but for the entire society's competitiveness. It's not only an issue of fairness, it's an issue of competitiveness. So I will close with my own thought on that and turn it back to Bob.